Hello everybody. Today we're looking at 9.2, solving quadratics using square roots. Okay, so far we've had a lot of different ways of solving these types of quadratic equations. It's not as simple as linear equations where it's just, get x by itself. Depending on the situation, there's a lot of different ways. Maybe graphing is easier, maybe factoring is easier, maybe solving using square roots is easier. It's all going to depend on what the situation calls for. So in this case, we're looking at when it's easier to solve by square roots, this is how you do it. And we'll go over, which time is better to do it when. But for right now, let's just learn how to do it. Okay, so in example 1, what I want to do is I want to solve 3x squared minus 27 equals 0 using square roots. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is, I'm going to kind of go by those basic rules in linear equations where I want to just get x by itself. I'm not going to try to factor or anything like that. I'm just going to do 3x squared equals, I'm going to add 27 to both sides. So adding 27 to the left side is going to get rid of it there. Adding 27 to that side brings it right onto there. Okay, now I'm going to divide by 3. So I get x squared by itself. And 27 divided by 3 is 9. So now all I have here is x squared equals 9. Very interesting because I know how to get rid of a square, right? If I want, the inverse operation of squaring something, it's the square root. And, very nicely over here on the right side, if I have to do it to both sides, I know the square root of 9. So if I take the square root of both sides and I get x completely alone, which is perfect because that's exactly what I want. And the square root of 9, you're all going to say, is 3. Now what we need to be careful about here is that the square root of 9 isn't just 3. The square root of 9 is positive 3, right? Positive 3 times positive 3, 9. Or negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 3 is also positive 9. Okay, so I get two answers here. And so you would realize, if you were to come back to the beginning and you were to factor, you would get the same answer, x plus 3 and x minus 3, which would give you the values, x equals 3 and x equals negative 3. So I get two answers there. Let's check out part B here. I'm going to try and do the exact same thing. Okay, I'm going to add 10 to both sides, so I can get x squared completely alone. So x squared equals 0. What? Boy, you crazy. So now at this point, I got x squared equals 0. Okay, let's just keep going. This is what I did last time. Hopefully it'll work over here. X equals square root of 0, 0. Yeah, it's actually not that bad. For a second there, I was freaking out. But it turns out that it just makes it a little bit easier. Right? I guess if you wanted to do the same type of idea here, you could think positive 0 and negative 0, but that's kind of unnecessary. And lastly, let's look at part C. Right? I'm going to try and do the same kind of operations as before. I want to get x completely alone, so I'm going to have negative 5x squared. I'm going to subtract 11 from both sides. That way I can get 5x squared by itself. So that's going to equal 5. Then I'm going to divide by negative 5 on both sides. I'm going to get x squared equals negative 1. Uh-oh. I'm having an issue here. Because now I'm going to take the square root, right? So if I take the square root of x squared, awesome. I get x. That's exactly what I want. But what's the square root of negative 1? There is not a number which when I multiply it by itself will I get a negative, right? Even if I choose a negative number like negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. So there isn't a real solution to this. When I have the square root of a negative number over here, there are no real solutions. And we saw what that actually looks like graphically. Before we start freaking out and saying, oh no, this is so terrible, I don't know how to do this. We saw what this looks like. Graphically, that looks like a parabola that does not touch the x-axis. So it's not like this is so foreign to us that we should look at it and say, oh, I don't know what to do. We've seen it. Okay, so we have two solutions, one solution, and no solutions. So when that answer is greater than 0, I got 2 real solutions. When it's equal to 0, I have 1 real solution. And when it's a negative number, I have 0 real solutions. Alright? Now let's take a look at this one down here. A little bit different because looks like I have like factors on the left side. But it's going to be the same basic kind of idea. I'm going to take the square root of both sides because at this point everything on this side is squared. So when I take the square root of both sides, I get x minus 1 equals square root of 25 is, remember, positive or negative 5. Right? It's not just 5. So x minus 1 equals plus or minus 5. Okay, the next step for me would be to add 1 to both sides. But what's interesting here is that I have 2 different options on the right side here. If I add 1, I could be adding 1 to positive 5, or I could be adding 1 to negative 5. And we have to account for both of those situations. So what this is going to say is that x equals 1 plus or minus 5. I have those 2 options. It could be 1 plus 5 and I get 6, or it could be 1 minus 5 and I get negative 4. So I get 6 or negative 4. Okay? And then lastly, we have our little application problem at the bottom here, which says a touch tank has a height of 3 feet. Its length is 3 times the width. Okay, that's going to be important. So I'm going to go ahead and write that. Length equals 3w. The length is 3 times the width. The volume of the tank is 270. That's going to be important too. Volume equals 270. Find the length and width of the tank. Okay, so it looks like we're supposed to be using volume here. What's the volume formula? Well, volume equals length times width times height. Okay, I was given height, so I know that that's going to be a 3. Volume equals, and I was also given that the length is 3 times the width. So I can say length is 3w, so that's length, times width, times height, which is 3. So length, width, height. So what's really cool now is that if I fill in what the volume actually is, which is 270, I only have one variable, and I can solve for that variable. So what this is going to come out to is 9w squared. When I combine everything, 3 times 3 is 9, w times w is w squared. And now I have a square root problem, where all I have to do is simplify and find my solutions. I'm going to divide by 9 on both sides, which gets me 30 equals w squared, and then take the square root, and I get the positive or negative square root of 30 equals the width. And what was it that I wanted? I wanted length and the width. So if I have the width, I know the length is going to just be divided by 3. So I have both of my answers. Fantastic. Alrighty. Thank you for sticking with me the whole time. Hopefully this wasn't too confusing for you. We'll go over it in class, obviously. And have a good night.